In 2015, I had a very strange order, very strange job, and why it was Belarus, Republic of Belarus, to translate the novel of Kazakh author, writer, and as far as I can remember, he one of the very famous, the Leo Tolstoy for the Russian-speaking people, and I shared this information on my friends and translators, and I understood that this process involved lots of people, and everybody really want to achieve the success of this project. Really wanted that this project should achieve the success, and Tatiana Struk asked me about webinar about on this topic, and this idea I had in the air, and I thought about that for a long time, and finally it is resulted at what I'm going to share today with you. So I'm going to read it out because this is one very important for the context setting for those people who don't know. In his programmatic article, Nursultan Nazarbayev, the president of the Kazakhstan Republic, the title was had a name "View to the Future: Modernization of the Public Consciousness," and he underlined the importance of the formulating the image of the Kazakhstan in the world, in the global image, and it is based not only the raw materials like oil or some technologies, but innovations, but in the external policy, international policies. To show the world that the Kazakh Republic has its own culture, art, theater, and in this program article he highlighted the importance of the project, which had the name Kazakhstan Culture in the Global World. The Ministry of Culture of the Kazakhstan Republic, together with the Union of Writers, the artists and experts, they had 4 shortlists created, which on 4 genres, 4 trends: literature, theater, cinema, and choreography, classical and conventional music, and the art. In the literature, they had 193 authors, and this list included the young authors together with the famous traditional authors. And I had the novel named Karaganda, written by Gabiden Mustafin. It was written in 1957. I started finding information about the author, and the official option is that he was born in 1902 and died in 1985, and he was the Soviet writer, the member correspondent of Academy of Sciences of Kazakhstan Republic, and he started being published since 1927, and he had 5 novels, and the last was published in 1959. And the novel Millionaire in 1948, he got the state prize, a person, a really huge stone, a slump of culture of the Kazakh literature. In the official chronicles, he was introduced as we got used to it from the scratch. He was the people's from grassroots writer, and there is one more non-official option, and I would like to share it with you. Some of the things, they are really very interesting. Unofficial version, non-official version. He was really the son of the Bai. This is a kind of wealthy duke at that time, he was educated from the noble family. His father knew Arabic language, and he wanted to give to his son very good education. And in fact, this person was really educated, and somehow he wasn't a systematic representative of the Soviet state, because when he was born and when he lived, he started living his life, this person. So my best friend Karbunov Kuzma Yakovlevich, he is a translator, and I used his translation into Russian, and I used it as a source text for translation into Spanish. What I was surprised, first of all, that the dates are almost the same of the birth and death. Gabidin Mustafin was born on the 13th of November 1902, and Kuzma Gorbunov was born on the 10th of November 1903. So only 1 year was between their births. Mustafin died in 1985. Gorbunov died in 1986 again. And I had this sad situation. Is this a coincidence? I don't think so. Gorbunov worked a lot with the literature translation from the Asian, Middle East languages, or Asian languages, and he translated the work of Mustafin a year after it was published. During the work on this novel, I was surprised how Kuzma worked. Usually So you'd better make it clear that you did the Spanish translation. So I translated this novel for international readers to give them a possibility to read, to get acquainted with the Kazakh culture and literature. Now, Václav, you interrupted me, and I tried to catch my thought back. So, about the work of the translator, this is not the only novel I translated. I tried to translate one of the Cuban author. It was on the Babel Cube resource, and it was interesting for me. And when I thought about the details of his novel, I contacted with the author, and it was some deteriorations, and the author introduced changes into his work, because I was right. And after that, the translators who used this for translation into other languages, they retranslated several parts. Yes, of course, I'm quite a person, but Mr. Gorbunov didn't do a very good job, in fact. And please, you will understand that I complain about him. So, author about his works gave very good responses, because he told that they are not accidentally. These are results of my dreams and thoughts, and in my works, the collective labor and collective property are better than the private. And we remember the Soviet Union. For example, the domicile settlement Shiganak turned to be the steady cattle farm, and we remember that Karaganda it turned to be the steady city, and the real wealth can be born only under socialist power, and it was my credo. I don't know whether to believe or not, but I think that, well, before this before this book, it wasn't any good idea to represent the real culture, but life is quicker. So I'm reading all this not just to for the interpreters to catch, and for you just to understand. In my novel Millionaire, I tried to be faster than time, but it wasn't really good attempt, because life was more clever and more faster. And now, these four interpreters, our author was sent to Siberia, and he started his activity. First, he worked in the plant, and in Siberia he started being published in the local paper. And after that he was sent into Siberia. It is clear this is Siberia, whether some certain people were sent into exile. For example, some rich people, sons of the real rich people, to build Baikal and Amur's pipeline and railway. And there was state orders, and state orders is not a joke, and they had to survive in these conditions, under these conditions.
So the novel Karaganda, as I have already mentioned, was published in 1957. According to one of the versions I faced with, this novel was rewritten, which was it takes the first place in the bibliography of the author, and it is refined, and it is autobiographical in a way, because the author worked in mines, and he described some workflows rather well. Historical contexts we had to, you can see the line of the party, the development of Karaganda as an industrial city, and you also friendship between nations of the USSR, which were united by the socialism, also class enemies, class foes. And this is one of my favorite parts, because as a reader, could easily understand who was positive character and who was negative character, because these class enemies or class foes were very brightly described. For example, he had eyes like those of the mouse, and the eyes were just running. Imagine a mouse with kind of running eyes. And let me pause, and but I will not be pausing, because we will continue speaking about it. So the novel is published in the Kazakh language and translated into Russian, and due to some conditions and due to translation, some things can be lost, and we all realize it, and we understand that we are just translators. I remember, and I will quote Nikolai Klimchuk, I totally agree with him, because sometimes translation may be even better than the original, and it is really cool. But when the translation is bad than the original, it is very bad. It is really bad. What happened here? I don't know. Where it went wrong, I don't know. I read and read, I reread, and I forgot while I was preparing for my report, and I forgot my report at home, and still I managed to prepare, and I think maybe sometimes when in the places where I blame the author, it is the translator who is to blame. I live in Belarus. I'm half Spanish, and Spanish culture is very close for me, and Slavic culture is also close to me. But Asian culture, I know Asian culture from cinema and from people I communicated with. And from the novels we learned at school during Russian literature lessons, and some aspects were not clear for me. They were discovery, and I tried to keep these aspects. And I think, yes, such things should be kept. So, well, the author's inconsistency, these are the problems of the author. Yes, he was inconsistent. There are two main characters. The older one is a communist, and he was from Moscow. No, he was from Ukraine, and he was also a miner who came to share his experience with Kazakh people, and there was a young guy, a kind of D'Artagnan, who belonged to the party and shared the ideology of the party. And this young man also blamed the older person for his love for the past, but still, this retrograde person became rather progressive in a couple of pages, because he got new thoughts, and he became more and more progressive. Still, I couldn't understand how a person belonging to older generation could become progressive so fast. It was difficult for me to understand, and I had to transmit it to and I have Spanish, and it is easy to transmit it to Cuba and to Venezuela. And as for Soviet republics, which I knew only according to newspapers, it was a challenge. As for historical context, let us come back to historical context. Unfortunately, well, you can see the lower picture and how they showed progress. For example, you can see these laser shoes and our older Russian brother and the Kazakhs, and I felt even sorry for them, because they also showed them as people who are illiterate, who knew nothing, and I consider this is a bad thing to represent your people like this. But in the context of the leader of a communist party, and for example, he said that here all people from the whole USSR were represented here in this novel, and I counted 15 republics, and he uses pluralia tantum, and he speaks about two people, but to work to comply one machine, to work with one machine, we need at least two people. As for diachronic conflict, this is not difficult for translation if you know yourself what the author talks about, and it arises with within the framework of one ethnos, but between generation. This is a classical quotation, and yesterday Nicola Klimchuk told it, and now I'm going to speak about it. So
It means this example means that on one hand it has two meanings. A boy made a replica in a project team, and the other meaning that they picked up a girl at the party. So they squeezed, compared with each other in forces. And who did that? And who did that? That is the question. So the boys, some boys, they compete in force. Men and women, a man and a woman cannot compete with men in force. Yes, you are right. There were two friends and they squeezed each other, and they just played fools, and they compete who is stronger, and it was fun. Now the examples from the text. The word steam means steam in a bath, means to scold. The examples that she fried her husband as the wheat on a frying pan. What did I do? I translated it into the modern Russian language, and after that I translated this into the Spanish. It wasn't a problem for me because I understood what he was talking about, but for me, I would like to share with you that it was interesting for me. So, what it was, who is my hero, my character? The author of the book or the translator? I think that the translator, because in the Kazakh language, if we did a back translation, for example, white hands, we can use them only to clean the dust at home. And I'm going to descend, to come down, to come to you. Now the examples in the Russian language from the book. Again, the example from the Russian language. For example, our stupid by 10 turns off his nose, white hands. They should only clean the house. So I cannot judge. The speaker is from the Kazakhstan, from Kazakh Republic. I need to find the original. I cannot give any comments on that, you know. Белоручки, white hands. They should only clean the house. They should only clean the house. Now they are discussing the possible ways of translating this into the Kazakh language. It was direct translation, I suppose. A person who likes cleanliness. Yes, okay, so thank you very much, Kuzma. I will find your tomb. Really, it should be a person, a fan of the cleanliness. So it was really, it was just the result of the translator's work. Next off, thank you very much for your comment, but for the rest of you, for everybody, so white hands, a person who a white hand person is a person who does not want to do anything. In the Russian language, it has quite opposite meaning, another meaning, and I find out that white hands here means a person who likes cleanliness, a cleanliness fan. And here's the white hands. So, unfortunately, the translator Kuzma did not a really good job, and I have a very big question for the editors, because we can remember that during the Soviet time there were literature editor, the other editors, and the proofreader, and how they allowed to do such a poor quality job. Then, when we speak about the word beautiful, again, Adelaida speaks about the examples from the text, from the book. For example, during the party meeting, the leader tells that we are not going to be modest. We worked a lot, but we prepared few people. The question, is it a negative or positive result? Result is negative. I'm also for it. I'm not modest. I'm not being modest. I prepared a few people. I've been working, but I prepared a few people, the result. But I thought that they were prepared good. So, inner enemies, I've taught already that this topic was very, very brilliant for me, and it was a really pleasure to me. They gathered at home. Of course, they planned some negative things against the Soviet power, and they make agreements about the best way of the fight with the Soviet power to spend the food for workers. And I just imagined that a kind of the worker who wasn't given a food and in a coal mine. And I can imagine that the coal mine is very deep, and if a person dares not to give a food to a miner, what will happen with them?
And I came to you and I tell you I'm a Russian Spanish translator, and we recognize, yes, you don't know English, but still I warned you, and I warned you openly, I am Russian Spanish translator, and this is the same thing. How I tried to avoid this. The last thing was I translated, let me remember, I said, I cannot say concretely, but we were judged, yes, we were justified, and it was clear, and it was clear in that context. Propaganda, and we face with it about all over the novel. This novel, if you are an experienced old worker and you are afraid to get new and something new until you get new results and you realize how it works, and once again you have bitin and mind corrosion. And this cliche was used in Soviet papers, and it transformed. It also transferred the meaning, and this is my favorite. Well, I'm not a feminist, but still, Now, after marriage, my past character changed a lot, and she came to work. She was a young girl who should sit at home according to traditions, but she decided to start working because women were respected if they worked, and her gray eyes were smiling, and both at home and at work she wore a neat clothes. And let's come back to the beginning of the quote. But now, so how did my pa dress before? And so it means that somebody married her, and she started wearing neat clothes and some and. So she changed in a positive way. Oh, and this is due to the author and to the translator. And the last one is my favorite. It's the propaganda, and it has always existed in all stages of the Soviet Union, because there was a strategy that we have to criticize and. Komsomol members must criticize their leaders. Why don't you call Comrade Taibeka for the Komsomol meeting? And I think, what are we doing? Why the mind doesn't function? Who works badly? And we remember who doesn't give the workers enough food. Somebody has a strange mouse-like eyes, unfair eyes. And imagine I approach and said, "Hey, Taibek, you don't work properly and you are going to be criticized today." National colored, and it was very interesting. National color was also national coloring was very interesting for me. National flavor, for example. Let me be the victim of your bright forehead. Oh, that's a cool expression. But it was told by a woman to her nephew, and it's a really cool curse. I thought that the woman, a real aunt, would never curse her nephew, her favorite nephew, her nephew whom she loved. Before translating, if you had any doubts, did you address the original, or did you consult the person who knows Kazakh language? All the time, I addressed to my client and asked her different questions, and she told me to leave it as it is. But I know that as it is would not sound well in Spanish language, and even if one person read it in Spanish, it would be impossible to read. And I hope that one person has already read this novel, and it would be success for me. This is direct translation, but this is not a curse. Am I right? Shall I be the victim of your bright forehead? Victim, the word victim. And the discussion, the discussion takes place. So let me continue. A real bright future is when you have more. It's also national color, Kazakhstan, Asia, and also striving for enlargements or epos. And for example, you can hear there was a pot as huge as a hole. Rails were very thin as a ton, and between its wheels a caravan of camels could come through. And if you translate directly, and there is a discussion in the hall. Directly in Kazakh language, it would mean I can die for you. So you see that there is translator's mistakes. It seems that translator just took the dictionary and substituted the words. Maybe this well, I translated it as very positive emotion, and it suited the context. So I translated it as the delight, and it suited the context very well. As for epos, it was really great. In hot air, mirage, there was mirage. Well, I could see it, and I even saw a mirage here, and really what I cannot imagine, it's when they took the color, because they were surprised, what is it, a collar? And it is a kind of it's an element of the clothing, and they were catching themselves and doing like this. Oh, I'm so surprised, so that I'm pulling my collar. Well, usually we act this way to the child who misbehaves, for example, or does something wrong. For example, if a child runs and is about to fall, and well, maybe in this situation we would say tear the hair out, and they were also surprised due to all these kettles and other kinds of techniques, and so I was really in this. When you speak about this phrase, for example, well, in the times of industrialization, the city required labor force, and there were lots of people tried to come there, and it was a natural process, and they looked for new work for money. They built houses, just a kind of houses in the ground. The whole city was digged, but you know, I got used to the fact that herd of horses exist in Russian language, and I was surprised. Yes, you remember that flocks of fish we say about in the Russian language, and there you see there is a notion of herd of horses. So the herd of horses, it's when you have 10 horses. Don't let me go wrong, but my client told me exactly like this. And there is a range according to, there is a rating according to amount, to quantity of horses, and there is something less or something more. And it was surprising, it was interesting, but in Spanish it was translated, it was rendered as a herd of horses, because people do not differentiate because there are horses and people who ride horses. And if judging by this sentence, you may say that there were 5 horses in the sentence. And now imagine a large quantity of snow, and this amount of snow, which was ran by 25 horses, by 25 horses, and what left of the snow, and what was the city like after this. And still everything was made for the target reader. When I did my first literary translation for the magazine World Literature, I cooperated with the editor all the time. And the editor told me, Adela, your translation must put your reader into the atmosphere, so that the reader would read it in Russian or in Spanish, as in your case, as if it was written on this language, as if it would a reader would read this novel in Spanish or in Russian. So I dealt a lot with localization, and I avoided, and well, I tried to translate, to make a translation, but in dialogue some special words were left. I just left these words, and these words helped me to show the color, to show the flavor, and thus I helped to see my readers to see the place and to see Kazakhstan.
Toy, the Kazakh word, means feast. What does it mean? It was in the context of someone left, I don't remember exactly where to. It was a young comrade, and he left somewhere, and when he will get back, we're going to have toy. Toy means feast, toy means wedding party. So translator Kuzma didn't give me any references, and so I used Google, and usually Google was broken, and if 2015 you were out of Google, it was my blame. Not only we like to have a rest, but Spanish people and Brazilian people like different carnivals, etc. And there were lots of such examples in the novel, and I used Spanish words, but in the dialogues where these words were mentioned, I thought that I tried to reach this kind of flavor that I wanted to. And this is my favorite. I have a very rich fantasy, frankly speaking, and it's really do not help me to work. It doesn't help me to work. And when I started, I had a very ill main character, and he was rotten alive, and I just imagined this smell. And His round face looked like full tarsik, and it faded as this tarsik was emptied. So it is understood from the context that it was internal enemy, and tarsik was a kind of the thing you can see on the slide. This is a
kind of a jar.
A container for water, for wine, or whatever. And when it is full, it is big in size, and when it is empty, it was small. But the face,
Looked like this.
this is probably the modern tarsik, because it was round before. It looked like pumpkin, you know. Okay, Google failed me, sorry. Google failed me, and now I can see this. So, and you will have to live together with it, not only me. So for you, how I translated this, really? Here I thought that I decided to leave tarsik. I was happy not to provide the picture, and I made a translator's note that this is container for transportation of liquids, and looked like the traditional canister, a traditional container. The more problems, I think it is the problem of the first part, and put the boat there, and he worked on it. From the nostrils of the sleeping was snoring, unpleasant snoring, and his lips made smoking sound. Why a person observing this internal enemy sleeping didn't understand that проблемы с микрофоном, the problems with the sound. I translated that, but these were dialogues together with me and my colleague who died in 1986. Otherwise, I would address him, of course. Allusions. I understand that animals can be illusions, but magpies, for example, I think that the magpie is tricky, but a hound dog can be noisy. No, it's go-oriented. You know, I found in the Spanish language the characteristics which match these the animals which characterize this or that character. But I had to work to elaborate all that. He was disbanded for welfare peasants' perversions. Welfare peasants' perversions. How can you explain to a Spanish-speaking person, to the Spanish? How can you explain to the person who lives in Latin America? I couldn't understand it, how kind of perversions may a welfare peasant have. So, if I don't understand, how can I translate it properly? I wonder. It wouldn't. Antonina Fedorovna preserved good. Although she was 40 years old, she looked for 30 boys. I have a claim to you. I would like to use idiom. Well, it's not possible to translate. So of course we use the Russian language as the intermediate language, and we're approaching the end. So preserving the flavor, because it's very important, and I like Marcus and in the translation because the translation managed to transfer me there. I like reread. So yesterday Klimchuk thanked me, and I know that it was a genius. I told Klimchuk that he was a genius. I reread the novel of Rudy in my translation, and I understand that I can feel this atmosphere, this environment, and it's very important, and it gives the wish, the desire to read more and to get to know the culture and what we can fix. We put it as it is, because... So, do you have any questions right now? There is a bucket of compassion to you, to your job. So I wish you that the thank you very much should look like this, and here's you can see my contacts, and you can see the link to my sufferings for Karaganda in Facebook, and I saved them using hashtag. And you will be able to find the information, because it is very interesting to read the comments under these hashtags, and my link to my Facebook page, my professional page as a translator from Belarus, in case you will have. So Adela, first of all, we have a question: the destiny of this book in Spanish. Do you know about that? No, unfortunately I don't about this, but I think that it was published, because the project was very ambitious, and the kind of author's copy. Did they send it to you? No, they didn't. I must say that it had certain destiny. It was published, I think, because the client asked me in a year for me to work with them to translate, but we didn't agree upon the rates and the conditions, and if the client referred to me again, I think that my job was accepted. Thank you. Do you have any other questions, wishes, comments? Then, so thank you very much. Now please have a rest.